So indeed, today I will talk to you about our project at the Botanical Gardens. Show of hands, how many people have been at the Botanical Gardens? Woo, quite a few, excellent. Those of you that haven't had a chance yet, I highly recommend it. It's free if you're a UBC student, so do check it out. It's a lovely space. So let's start with a brief introduction. Most of my research has centered on the topics of sustainability and behavior change. One could say that behavior is at the center of our sustainability problems, which offers a glimpse of hope that it means that we can re-engineer things and therefore behavior can be at the center of sustainability as well. But we know creating behavior change is quite difficult. It depends on quite a few factors, from social norms, context, infrastructures, policy, different incentives. So we know that behavior takes time, but behavior change takes time, and behaviors can be quite habitual. But there is quite a bit of insights from the literature that through work and focusing on all these elements, we can create long-lasting change and propel ourselves into a more sustainable future. Botanical gardens are uniquely situated to help us in this shift towards sustainability because they provide an environment very conducive to demonstrating sustainability and the concepts of biodiversity. They already focus on education and outreach, and now we're adding, of course, they already do a lot of research, but adding all of these collaborative interdisciplinary components together, we can create an even stronger push. That's back, this is front. So the program that we are working on is called Sustainable Communities Field School. It's a collaborative program between the UBC Botanical Gardens as well as SPEC, Society Promoting Environmental Conservation. It's one of the oldest non-profit environmental organizations in Canada. And the program has been designed and modeled on the UNFAO Sustainable Farmer Field School program, which was quite successful at changing farmer practices towards more organic, less pesticide use and things like that. So as we know, we need to somehow motivate more sustainability in our communities, and a lot of people come through the gardens looking for education and outreach and things like that. So why not combine these things together and deliver a sustainability tour while people are already there? The tour is guided by two key instructors. Dr. Tara Moreau is one of them, and Oliver Lane from SPEC is another tour, and there's a whole bunch of us volunteers and other helpers that go and help and guide and make sure the tour is delivered. The four key areas of the field school are on water, food, waste, and biodiversity. These concepts are also common in the Sustainable Development 2030 goals. So this was the rationale behind focusing on them. So I will take you now through a brief tour of the field school, what the field school looks like. Here we have a map of the Botanical Gardens, and the red dots signify the 12 key stops that we make sure that all participants go through. So the tour, the participants upon arriving to the garden are greeted. They fill out the waiver forms and our surveys for the Canopy Walk. And then they're split into smaller groups, which facilitates learning. So sometimes we have rather large groups, we have to split into extra subgroups and make sure we time everything perfectly. But the tours usually last about 3 hours. And the highlight, of course, is the Canopy Walkway, the Green Heart Canopy Walkway. There are several other of these throughout the world, Brazil, I believe, Peru, Nigeria as well. So they're expanding. It's a wonderful way to give people another way of interacting in the garden, seeing the tree canopy from a different perspective. There's about 9 platforms, I believe, a 310-meter long canopy suspension bridge, and along the way we deliver various education components of that curriculum I mentioned. Water is one of the key components here. We talk about water quality and quantity and the roles forests and trees, of course, play in that role. Watersheds, consumption, things people can do at home. Activities, group activities are another key component of the field school. In fact, we market it as team building in nature, so there's quite a demand for that in the corporate world as well, as you may be aware. People want to bring their workers for some bonding, gathering, hanging out. So again, why not come to the gardens where we can deliver to these guys that are racing with their water strings, trying to carry their water resource to a point, and they have climate change rope to climb over, and maybe population growth to go under on the way back. So it's a lot of fun. And another key part of the field school tour is the demonstration organic garden. The visitors sample some edible flowers. They do other activities, of which this is one of the unpacking the life cycle of what goes into production of a coffee cup, which most of us have probably every day. There's 60 different cards and 7 different sectors that they have to go through and put it all together, and we get to discuss all kinds of topics. So the key research question that we've used to drive this research point involves what is the impact of the field school on people's knowledge, their attitudes, and their willingness to act. So the methods, 2x2 factorial design, we have the groups, which are the field school participants, as well as regular garden visitors who did not attend the field school tour, so they're acting as our control. We have the time, which is, of course, before and after the visit. And the measurements, as mentioned, the ecological knowledge, the attitudes, connections with nature, and the willingness to engage in environmental actions. I will now give you a little brief summary of what is in those 3 key components. For the knowledge, these are the questions and the topics that we discussed during the curriculum tour. So we focus on the local watersheds, we discuss how much food is wasted globally, the impacts of organic agriculture, the threats to biodiversity. So we asked them later on their post-survey to recall these concepts and define these questions. And for the environmental attitudes, we decided to look at the literature. Of course, environmental attitude scales have been used quite extensively, and we decided to adopt these scales, which have been tested and validated in the field. They involve ecocentrism, short nature relatedness, the revised new ecological paradigm, and from the literature we also created a scale. It's called intention to act, where we were trying to infer if people are willing to take these actions at home and then connect it to the behaviors, which we will ask them later. They are very related, but all 4 scales ask slightly different questions. Some focus more on the emotional well-being, such as it makes me happy to be in nature or makes me sad to see nature destroyed. The ecological paradigm is more touching on things. Do people understand, I guess, the spaceship Earth concept? Do they understand that we have the ability to upset the balance of nature? The nature relatedness is a bit of both of these. It's about, do people think about their actions and their relationship to nature? And the intentions to act is the scale that kind of gets very close to the willingness to do behaviors, because it's dealing with behaviors that we know are actually that have an impact on, like voting, using less AC and less heat in winter, and carpooling more. And the willingness to act, we had 20 total behavioral measures, and again, those 4 key topics from the curriculum: water, food, waste, and biodiversity. And these, I guess, behavioral measures also have been asked before in previous research, and we thought these are behaviors that most people should be able to do, whether they're owning their place or renting. Again, some of them might be a little difficult, but overall we thought these are behaviors that would give us a sense of people's willingness to act. So a little bit about participants. We had a total of 405 participants, 2 groups again, field school participants and garden visitors. This is their demographic breakdown. It's quite similar in terms of male to female ratio, the age, and the education levels. So that was very good. And now we go into the results. So the data was analyzed through R, and we ran either the analysis of variance, ANOVA tests, chi-square tests, and regression tests. So here we have the knowledge questions. It was only asked on the post-visit. So after either the field school tour or as the regular garden visitors are leaving the garden, we asked them to answer these 6 key field school curriculum questions, and of course we noticed that the field school participants outperformed the regular garden visitors by quite a large margin. 5 of those are extremely significant. And it shouldn't be too surprising, I suppose, because the regular garden visitors did not attend the field school tour. They didn't have a guide telling them what these concepts are and how to define them. So, but the good news is that the field school participants did retain some information and they were able to correctly define these concepts. I would like to point attention to the defining organic agriculture here. I found this one quite interesting because it did show, even for the field school participants, even though we were very specific about what is organic agriculture in terms of the key terminology such as non-GMO and non-synthetic fertilizers, we were looking for the key words, but people in general would say, all natural, or good, things like that. So it really showed us that we need to work harder. People seem to have an idea what it is, but they don't really know what it is. And we see this in other fields and other concepts. So there is an opportunity there for education as well. For the environmental attitudes, this is results of the environmental attitude skills across all 4 scales. So all the ecocentrism questions are together, new paradigm together, and then we analyze it through the ANOVA analysis of variance, and we see that 3 of the 4 scales show quite a difference between the groups. You can also tell that in each instance, the field school participants, upon leaving the garden, report higher connection with nature or higher intention to act, whereas for the garden visitors, there's a bit of a drop, actually. So I found that, I did not expect that, so this was quite interesting and surprising, and of course it makes us think, okay, well, we need to do something more here then. But it's boding well for the field school participants so far. And now we will unpack those 4 key behavioral willingness to act in these 4 key areas. So first one is the food choices. There's one behavior, grow your own food, where we saw the difference between the 2 groups was borderline significant. Again, quite a change. If you look across the sectors, across the behaviors, the field school participants, again, showing that upward trend where sometimes the regular garden visitors, especially here, grow your own food. It is possible. Regular garden visitors saw the food garden. It's pretty, but it's a lot of work. Whereas the field school participants, we sampled some edible flowers, we talked about herbs and the health benefits. Maybe they thought, hey, maybe it's worth it. Maybe I can try this on my balcony. The waste reduction, I was pleasantly pleased as a waste researcher to see such high levels of willingness to engage with waste-specific behaviors. Again, one behavior, choosing items with low packaging. The field school group was showing significance there in their willingness to do it post-visit. And maybe, again, we can connect this to that unpacking of that life cycle of that coffee cup, what goes into production. Many different trucks, many different resource sectors all come together so we can enjoy a cup of coffee. And maybe people were making that connection post-visit. Water conservation, another action where we saw an increase for the field school participants, but also increase for the garden visitors. Yay! This is the one behavior where we saw the most significant willingness to increase. We cannot explain this one, just like we cannot explain why the garden visitors are showing sometimes a downward trend for some behaviors. But maybe for both groups, it's the fact that it's one of those behaviors that doesn't really require too much action. It's more actually doing less, like, oh, I don't have to do laundry today because I'm saving environment, or something like that. The biodiversity conservation was the behavior that, even though we, again, in the curriculum, we focus quite a bit on biodiversity, if you compare it with the waste, for example, you see behavior range. They come already willing to do these waste behaviors quite high, and then they stay pretty high. But then for the biodiversity, we see not so much willingness, I guess, to begin with. But again, this biodiversity area was the one where the field school participants showed, again, the increase. We have 3 behaviors with significance, and that is the buying forestry certified paper, volunteering for a nature group, and donating to nature conservation. So that was the last one for the behavior. And then we also ran the regression tests, multiple linear regressions, and previous research has also identified that certain demographic factors do correlate with willingness to do behavior or with actual behavioral measures. And we know that gender, age, education can make a difference. And in this instance, we saw the similar trend. We have male here as reference, which means females were more willing. We focus on the beta value and the p-value here. The females were more willing to engage in willingness to do the behavior, higher education as well, and in terms of the attitude measures, which were helping us predict this willingness to engage in the behavior, the intention to act scale and the short nature relatedness were the two scales that seemed to have the strongest predictability power. So that was one area that we were quite happy to be able to replicate some of these results. General discussion. The results of our research do seem to indicate that botanical gardens and the field school program is an effective education outreach model. So the field school participants, upon leaving the garden, seem to have been more knowledgeable, more willing to act, stronger connections with nature than the regular garden visitors who did not receive the tour. It is a little worrying to see that the regular garden visitors showed somewhat of a downward trend on a lot of these scales. Knowledge not included because, again, they did not receive an education tour. But that is something for us to think about. How can we engage regular garden visitors as well? Because it does seem to indicate that just having access to nature, having parks, having the greenery might not be enough. I should mention that this research results were the results from participants from last year. And since that time, the garden has installed lovely new information boards that I've seen all throughout the garden, which are very colorful, visual, and they are providing a lot more information than before. The garden visitors would say they went through, but all the names are in Latin. They were not, I guess, getting as connected to seeing an interesting plant. They don't have time to Google things. They could not maybe interact as much with the environment and what it all means. But now with these new information boards, it is possible that some of that will be improved. But that is something for the future research to look into, including to double test our findings and to see whether this the slide back will persist for the garden visitors. Limitations of our research, of course, there are some. You'll be surprised, of course, there are some. Of course, we are not sure what caused what. So we tried to connect some of the curriculum components about water quality and quantity and food waste and life cycle analysis to the willingness to do some behavioral actions, but we can't always make that link, of course, explicitly. Now, there are group differences as well. So the field school participants, they often know each other. They're from the same organization or place of employment, so they can interact better together, maybe laugh more, and all of those things can help. Whereas the regular garden visitors sometimes come in pairs of two, maybe smaller family, 4 to 6 participants. They may not stay in the garden very long. While I was doing my surveys as well, I noticed that some people had just come in, they seem to be leaving half an hour later. So some groups do stay longer. We know field school participants always stayed for 3 hours or more, so that they definitely stay in the garden for longer. The activities, of course, and the Green Heart Canopy Walkway. Most of the garden visitors did go on the canopy, but not everyone did. So again, the excitement level on the canopy, it's quite enthralling kind of a adventure because you're walking and it's the sights. Some people are a little scared of heights and they get really excited. So those things can all be creating this kind of positive emotions and willingness to engage. But we don't even know how long these effects will last. They're all feeling great and they're willing to do these behaviors, but we were not able to follow up with them weeks later or months later. Would these effects persist, the knowledge, the attitudes, or the willingness to engage with behaviors? And of course, we did not measure actual behavior. Of course, maybe if I follow them around with a secret camera, try to find out, are they recycling more? Are they trying to conserve water and these things? The key is to get to the true behaviors, the actual behaviors, which we know is very difficult to do and then to research on as well. But that's our goal for this year, for the field school. I can't tell you too much, but we are trying to operationalize some of these behaviors and try to kind of quantify them more and to see whether we can get closer to the actual behaviors. And that's the last slide I have. I would like to thank everybody at the Botanical Garden that has made me feel very at home. Patrick, Tara, Oliver from Spec. Many volunteers we've had throughout the garden last year and this year. My co-supervisor, Dr. Jiaying Zhao, as well. Thank you all. All right, questions? Yes?
Thanks so much for your talk. Did you do any statistical analyses between the two different groups pre-visit?
For the regression test? Yes.
Any sort of test?
So all of the tests were exactly compared between subjects, except for the knowledge question.
I mean, between the people who just visited the garden versus the people who did the tour. Do you compare those two groups?
No pre to post, just pre to pre and post to post.
Okay.
Yes, is that the question? Okay. Another question, yes?
I'm not sure if you missed it, but did you mention what was happening with the interviews? How did you approach?
Oh, how did I get my subjects? Yes. So the garden visitors luckily come on their own, of their own volition. I would just give them a treat for filling out my survey. So we had 119 of those. And for the field school participants, they come through the botanical garden by submitting a request. So these groups also came of their own volition, and they were recruited through the botanical garden marketing team. Yes, so the program is growing and it's getting quite hot in demand. So yeah, people come on their own, which is great. Yes, Terry?
Yeah, I'd love to know how you end up explaining that downward trend in visitors. But on the underfunding,
Yes.
to your regression slide, did you try erasing some of that effect by other factors? Because most of the time that finding is then explained by other things. So did you do like a stepwise regression here to start with gender and force and other variables? Or?
I think we grouped everything together. Yes. Yeah, no, we have not done that. Yes. Would that be something to look into? Yeah? Great. Yes, Kai?
I'm saying this is a fair of $2. I wonder whether the downward trend for a few of those variables is coming from a kind of counter-world response to the feeling of coercion.
Yes. Yes.
You've got two surveys, right? The visitors are expecting to do that kind of thing. And
Yes.
You've got two surveys and they both have that kind of a moral flavor of you doing this.
Yes, for sure.
And the second one they're getting wrong. So I think I'll leave that.
Well, I would mention that the field school participants, we had almost everybody who filled the post visit also filled the pre-visit. So, and we tried to match them quite a few times. For the garden visitors, only one person was willing to do pre and post. So for the garden visitors, they're different people. Different people pre, different people post. Yes. More questions? Yes?
Can you go back to your language of the actual questions?
For the behavioral measure,
Yeah.
this guy?
Actually, the next one, sorry.
The attitude scales. Yes. Oh, yes.
So I'm a little surprised, especially knowing that you're influenced by psychology and the psychological literature and the language in these. So environment's destroyed. It's a pretty strong word. And then you have another ecological crisis, exaggerated, okay, that's fair
Yes.
enough. But then you had another one, severely abusing, where did I say?
Yes, humans are severely abusing the environment.
I mean, those are just
Yes.
strong language. You could say a lot of things in different ways that I think
Yes.
are included. So it actually speaks to Kai's question about this moralistic tone. I'm curious about the selection of what you decided is psychological behavior.
Yes.
Because those are all very weighted. I know some are derived from the literature and some
Yes.
you feel more neutral. But some
Yes.
of them are very loaded in terms
The
of them
three
knowing what
are.
you want.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
think that psychology would have a pretty sophisticated theory about how to define things and to pay attention to things are moralistically charged when you consider. So could you just speak to that in terms of something you wish you had done differently or how
Yes.
you accounted for that
Yes.
design or analysis?
Yes.
Because it seems,
Yes.
So like I need kind of you should be happy. That one seems kind of tricky. The other ones.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, that is a very good point, indeed. So the 3 of these scales have already been established and developed in the literature, and it is true that the shortened revised ecological paradigm, and I can go to the results too, people did not seem to quite, that's the second one here. It's very, the drops and the rises are not as sharp. But it is true that the questions are a little, I guess, loaded was the word used earlier, and we are quite aware that there is a bit of a Hawthorne effect, of course, not a bit, a lot of the Hawthorne effect. People know they're being observed, they just fill out the pre-visit survey 3 hours early, now they're filling out a post-visit. Again, they're maybe with their employers. So this is definitely a limitation of the work that we are familiar with. And in terms of the scales, again, especially since it didn't give us the results were very almost neutral for this scale. I would not include the shortened nature ecological paradigm anymore, but I was quite surprised. I mean, I would think we are living in a spaceship Earth. So to me, that concept is not too difficult, but I was surprised that people really did not like that at all. They were even on the surveys, people would like give me comments and things, and they did have a very strong reaction to that scale, especially. So I did notice that for sure. The other scales were a lot more, but it is about how do we measure this attitude change from before and to after, and we decided to start with the established scales, start with that, see what we get with the results, and I believe if we want to redo the attitude measures, there'd be fewer questions, and maybe we would want to decide what are we going after. Are we going for the connection with nature? Are we trying to make these more ecological concepts, again with the spaceship Earth and the resource use, or are we going towards the intention to act?
Pilot any of these with open-ended sort of interviews, just see how people respond?
No. Yeah.
Maybe last question?
Sure. Yes.
Younger age, like, because you had oral around, like.
That was the mean age. Well, we did have younger as well as older participants.
Because I'd be interested in the different scales for interactive age. So possibly you were young, no, I'm not saying it's, but you might have, say, if you had really first-year students that had to take on and then, talked about this stuff a lot in school, you may have been okay with that one scale versus people who didn't have as much of that. So I'm curious to see when that dislike of that scale.
Yes. Where it hits the key point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Yeah. So I think there could be a difference there because, as you mentioned, some people might respond very sharply, and I did. It was all a very enjoyable experience, and I've learned a lot, and it's been a wonderful experience. That was the last question, correct? Yes, awesome.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for a great talk.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.